Shalom, and welcome to the practical Parsha for Parshat Terumah. Parshat Terumah speaks about the construction of the tabernacle, the Mishkan, the mobile miniature Bet HaMikdash, the miniature temple, the one they used while they traveled in the desert, and then later even they set it up in Israel, in a slightly different form as it was in the desert. It went through various stages until finally when they built the permanent, or as we refer to, the everlasting Bet HaMikdash, the temple, the holy temple in Jerusalem. The Parsha is called, however, Terumah. What does Terumah mean? Terumah means an offering, a lifting up. Why is it called Terumah? Because the very first several verses, in fact, from the beginning of chapter 25 in the book of Shemot, in the book of Exodus, all the way through verse 8, speak about the offering that Hashem requests. Hashem, if I have to put it in simple English, he asked for donations. He said, please, I want you to bring this offering, bring these donations so you can help build and be part of this special Mishkan, this special temple. The rest of the Parsha, however, literally the rest of the Parsha, the entire Parsha, speaks about the measurements, the construction of, and the material, of course, everything that's necessary to build this Mishkan, including the walls, the roof, which is the curtains that they use for the roof, the drapery, tapestry, the main vessels such as the ark, the menorah, the table, the small altar, and so on. Why is this Parsha become called Terumah? Why is it called Terumah offering? Shouldn't have been called the Parsha of Mikdash, of holies, or temple, or Mishkan, dwelling, or tabernacle. Of course, the argument could be made, and it's a legitimate argument, that since the Parsha begins with these words, therefore this becomes the name of the Parsha. We do, however, know that the name of the Parsha is not arbitrary, not even arbitrarily decided by being the first few words, the first few unique words in the Parsha. Rather, the name of the Parsha brings out the essence, the idea of the Parsha. Perhaps this can be better understood with verse 10. I'm sorry, not verse 10, forgive me, verse 8. Verse 8 reads, Va'asu li mikdash v'shachanti betocham. They shall make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell amongst them. And of course, the sages point out, betocho lo ne'emar. It doesn't say in it, meaning it doesn't say I will dwell in it. Rather, what does it say? Betocham, in them. Because what God is saying is, through the building, through the construction of the Bet HaMikdash, or in this case the Mishkan, the tabernacle, I will not only dwell in it, I will dwell amongst each and every one of them, to quote the sages. So this is not just about building a sanctuary in a certain location, in a certain place. This is not just restricted to one place. Rather, Hashem wants each and every Jew to become a sanctuary, each and every Jew to become a holiness in which he can dwell. And he promises, he actually assures us that by doing this, by making this effort, he will dwell in us. Thus we can better understand. You see, because if you think about it, if the only objective was to have a sanctuary, to have this beautiful edifice full of gold and all the other beautiful materials that they used, Hashem could have just told Moshe, look to the right. And you see that mountain right there? You see that mount? That's gold. You see that mound? That's copper. Why ask the people for it? I mean, after all, everything comes from Hashem. Everything that we possess comes from Him. And if the objective is only to have this actual finished product, just give Him the means and whatever it is. The fact is that so far, let's consider everything the Jews have. It was all given to them. Why not this? Think about it. Their freedom, leaving Egypt, was just given to them. They didn't have to leave. They didn't have to pull themselves out. They were sent out. Split the sea. They were ushered right across. All the money, all the riches they have, the water, it's given to them. The food, it's given to them. So why this? Suddenly Hashem is like, listen, now I need you guys to give. I need some contributions. Hashem's sticking His hand out and says, listen guys, please, can you help here? The answer is, both in the main Bet HaMikdash, in the temple, and in our individual temples. It's not only about, or I should say it's not about the end result of having this nice, beautiful golden edifice, but it's about how much we give. The dwelling place Hashem is looking for, the dwelling place that He seeks, is not the perfection that we imagine. It's the best that we can give that serves as protection to Hashem, as perfection to Hashem. In other words, we imagine beauty, and rightfully so. In our imagination, beauty is when something's really beautiful. Beauty is when it really can pass as perfect. That's beauty. That's not what Hashem was seeking. I think about it. Anybody listening to this class, if you have children, the art that the preschooler brings home, that art, right? Where do you put? You throw it in the garbage? You spit on it? No, you hang it up on the fridge. Some people, I'll tell you a secret, including myself, I even save some selections, write a date on it and a name. Why? Well, is it really beautiful? Can I take it to a gallery and see if they can sell it for me? Make the family rich? No. But it's so special. Because it's not perfect. But it's what the child can give. The child gave his or her all. And they're so proud. They put into it. They spent the time. Those crooked lines, those coloring out of the lines, those scribbles. It's so beautiful. And that's what Hashem says. I don't need that perfect edifice, so to speak. Because as Hashem says, Li ha-kesef v'li ha-zahav. To me it's all silver and gold. Who created silver? Who created gold? Who made all of this? I need you. I give it to you. I don't need you to make it for me. But here Hashem says, I want you to please give from yourselves. And as He uses the words, He says, from every man whose heart impels him to generosity. In other words, give it in accordance with your generosity. Give it all you got. Give it the best that you can give. That's the beauty that I want. Of course, in this case, as it was a finite edifice, ultimately they had to melt all that gold and make it into one beautiful structure, coated in gold, all equal. You didn't see any blemishes. That's certainly the case. But in our individual Bet HaMikdash, if I was to match myself against somebody who's really learned, somebody who's a real tzaddik, somebody who's really, pious and righteous, it's not even a matter of humility. Just reality is that, what is this? This is a rundown, it looks worse than a rundown abandoned building. It looks worse than, a house of horrors. Could be. But if I am giving my best, this is what I can give from my heart, and I give the best. Plus, that's gold. That's silver. That's the most beautiful royal, wool and everything to Hashem. Why? Because I gave my best. And my edifice that Hashem dwells may not be beautiful for someone else, but for me, it's very, very beautiful. And that's the lesson already from the name of the Parsha. It's not about necessarily the end product, but it's about the Terumah, your contribution. What are you giving towards this? And we all have a lot to give, make no mistake. But we have to give our best. And each individual knows what's their best. And it's really, in that case, it's a personal relationship between ourselves and Hashem, and how He will dwell in the beautiful edifice that we can possibly produce based on what our abilities are. Moving on, if you look in verse 10, very interesting that it immediately, before even telling us what the walls are going to look like, before even telling us what the ceiling is going to look like, before addressing even, as I will explain in a moment, I'll expound on it, what should have been the first of all the vessels to be discussed, immediately he says they should make an ark. And he describes how it was made of acacia wood, and was coated from the inside, from the outside with gold, and all the details. Why are we speaking about the ark as the first artifact, as the first vessel? Let me fill you in. Let me expound. And this is especially according to Maimonides. According to the Rambam, the most important objective, or I should say the main component of building the temple is about the altar, is about having a place on which to offer the sacrifices to Hashem. Furthermore, according to the Rambam, even if we don't have the walls of the temple, even if you don't have the actual entire building, the construction, even if you're missing all the other vessels, the fact that you know where the exact spot, the designated spot for the altar is, and you build an altar, already provides the opportunity and the obligation to offer sacrifices. Indeed, it comes out according to Maimonides that when they were building the second temple, remember they had just come up from Babylonia, there was nothing else and nowhere else to offer sacrifices because they can only do it there on the Temple Mount. But it did take a number of years, at least four plus something years, to actually construct the entire plaza, the entire building, the whole edifice of the Bet HaMikdash. The walls, the chambers, and everything. What did they do in that time? Well, it comes out according to Maimonides, no problem. They had a prophet who prophesied the exact location of where the altar needs to stand. They constructed an altar immediately, which doesn't take that long, relative to the rest of the building, and they offered sacrifices all along until they were able to finally finish the entire building. Thus, the question is, why is the Torah speaking about the ark prior to speaking about the altar, if that's the most important component of the entire Bet HaMikdash, the entire Mishkan? Perhaps we can better understand this. And this is also especially following what I said already, about this not just being about building the main, big, general temple, but the individual's temple in us, the individual's Mikdash. The sages tell us a very interesting fact about this ark. Now just note that this ark that was made under Moshe, under the auspices of Moshe, meaning it was made by Moshe under his authority, this ark still exists somewhere. This ark was used throughout and served in the first temple very close to the time of the destruction of the first temple. And this ark was hidden away when they hid away all the main artifacts, and when Mashiach comes we will find it. Thus this ark, which is described in these verses, stood in the actual temple. Now, if we take a look at these verses, the Torah describes the exact measurement, right? The dimensions of this ark: 2.5 cubits, the length, 1.5 cubits the width, the height. It has the keruvim. It has a dimension. Having a dimension means it takes up a certain amount of space. And if it was any smaller or bigger, it wouldn't be suitable, because the Torah says it has to be this size, not another size. Correct? So it had a finite dimension, at a certain measurement, at a certain amount of space that it took up. The sages tell us an interesting fact. They say, Makom ha'aron eino min hamidah. The place, meaning the space it took up, this ark, was not in the equation. What? What does that mean? Well, imagine that the Holy of Holies, in which the ark stood in the center, towards the entrance, the Holy of Holies was 20 cubits wide. That's a large room, especially just for one lone standing artifact of only 2.5 cubits. The sages tell us that when one took a measuring yard, imagine taking, a good Stanley measuring tape, and you measure the Aron, measure the ark, one would find that it conforms exactly to these dimensions as prescribed in the Torah, because it was made then, and that's the way it was. However, if one should have taken that very same measuring yard, the very same measuring tape, and measure from the wall to the ark, to one side of the ark, and then from the other side of the ark to the wall, they would find that there was no cubits missing. Meaning, they measured 10 and 10. How is that possible? There has to be a 2.5 cubit deficiency from somewhere, right? It's got to be somewhere in the middle. You figure about, 8 3/4 from one side, 8 3/4 from the other side. How is this possible? The sages tell us that this is nimna ha-nimnaot, the impossible of the impossibles. Meaning that this is the so to speak, the atmosphere, the environment in the Holy of Holies was such that there was a fusion, an absolute fusion between the finite and the infinite, the possible and the impossible. What does this mean? How does this happen? Well, if you really think about it, finite, we understand. It's finite. It's limited, right? It's limited to time and space. For example, I'm here right now. Because I'm here right now, I cannot be there right now. If I'm there, I'm not here. If I'm here, I'm not there. Because we're limited to these finite limitations of time and space. That's called gvul. Then there are things that are beli gvul, things that are infinite. Spirituality, even to some degree perhaps. Let's say angels, they're not limited to the same ramifications of the finite limitations that we are. However, if you really think about it, beli gvul, meaning the infinite, is also a certain form of limitation. How is the infinite a certain form of limitation? Because it's infinite, it's unlimited, it cannot limit itself. It is not limited, it cannot limit itself to any particular thing. Wow. So you have the limited, the finite, and the unlimited, the infinite. You can't bring the two together, because this is finite and this is infinite. However, there is a power that is able to bring the two together and fuses them together and makes them work together in harmony. That power is called God, Hashem, who is beyond any whatsoever limitation, even the limitation of the infinite. Thus, Hashem's power, He can bring spiritual and material together. We all encounter such examples. You walk by a door, you kiss a mezuzah. I mean, really, what is it at the end of the day? It's just a piece of parchment that came from the skin of a cow with some letters on it. It's very finite. Not only is it finite by the virtue of the fact that it's a material thing, but even by Jewish law, it's very finite. It has to be a certain dimension, it has to be a certain proportion, it has to be written in a certain way and not in another way, and it has to be made out of this and not out of that, and so on. However, it's holy. Why is it holy? Because it has godliness in it. So there's a power in there that's beyond just the actual physical material. And likewise, in everything else. When we do a mitzvah, how do we have the power to infuse, to inject holiness into anything we do. How is a pure tefillin become holy? How is a Torah become holy? How is the sound of us just sounding a horn suddenly become an act of holiness? Because Hashem is the one who directs the power to fuse the infinite with the finite. Where you see it most, and anybody that had the ability to go into the Holy of Holies, this is the best example. A smaller example of this, and as I was studying with somebody today, he pointed out to me, was that we know that a certain phenomenon in the Holy Temple that even the simplest of people can experience, was it says that when they stood, one of the miracles that happened in the temple, as described in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, one of the miracles is, it says, Omdim tzfufim u'mishtachavim ravachim. When they stood, it was tzafuf, it was tight. There was no room to move. There was so many people jam-packed into that place. But when they had to bow, and we talk about bow, it's not just slightly bowing their heads as we're used to. It's literally bowing and prostrating themselves, literally stretching out. And each one needed what we call 4 amot, 4 cubit. It's about 6 to 7 feet space. The normal, regular height of a grown male. Suddenly, miraculously, they all had a space. Where did that space come from? That was the fusion. But they didn't change. They didn't stop existing. And the walls didn't expand. You understand? You didn't see the walls moving. You didn't see the floor suddenly expanding. The people didn't suddenly become miniature Lego people, so they had all the space to prostrate themselves. They were still the same people they were a moment ago. And then when things ended, when they finished prostrating themselves, it was squishy again. There was no space. But in that moment, they got to experience the fusion of the finite and infinite. Thus, the Torah begins with this, because the Torah is telling us something. Hashem knows who we are, where we are, what we are. You know why? Because He made us. He placed us here. And He asks of us to give Him that donation, to build that Bet HaMikdash, to give Him room to dwell in us. How can we possibly do it? How can we possibly walk up that altar in our hearts and start offering to Hashem? Hashem says the first thing is make an ark. You need to connect yourself to the Torah. The ark is symbolic of the Torah, because what did the ark have in it? What made the ark so special? The gold? The acacia wood? No. The tablets that were in there. Mm-hmm. And besides the tablets, we know, or in addition to the tablets, they had also a small Torah, a Torah scroll. So it's the ark. Every ark we have in a synagogue, no matter how big or small, is a replica, a resemblance to that ark. And we have the holies in there. Connect yourself to the Torah. When one connects oneself to the Torah, it is not going to cancel out the finite reality. We don't cease living our lives. But a life that is connected to Torah, a life that's infused in Torah study, especially when it's done the right way on a daily basis. Better learn a little bit every day than a lot once a week. When one studies Torah every day, one taps into that special power, that godly power that's able to infuse the finite and the infinite. When you fuse the finite and the infinite doesn't cease being finite. It doesn't cease existing. Remember, the same time you measured from one wall to the ark, and from the ark to the other wall, the ark was still taking up space, but it wasn't taking up space. What does this mean? If you actually study Torah, try it, and you'll see that it works. The bills will still be bills. The problems will still be problems. Life will not stop being life, with the challenges that life brings each and every individual in their life. But you live on a different plane. You're ticking. Your clock is ticking, but it's ticking in a totally different way. The ticking is almost music. You're like, but how is that possible? The fact is, even when I stopped learning, the same bill that was on the table that's overdue was there, is there. It's not going to go fly away because I studied Torah, because I took a page of the Talmud and studied, or because I studied a discourse in Chassidut. The same bill that was on the table before I began to study is still there. And yes, it's still going to bother me. I'm still going to figure out how I'm going to pay that bill, how I'm going to take care of it, how I'm going to make good on other things. But the panic is not there. Mm-hmm. The pain is not there. There's something, there's an infinite feeling, there's a godly feeling in you that helps. It's not a drug. See, what a drug does is it just suppresses the bad feeling. You feel in a totally different level. And that's the message Hashem is saying. In order for us to be able to go about this, building our temple, building our edifice for Hashem, first and foremost, we need to connect to the ark. We need to become symbolic of the ark. To be there, but at the same time while we're there, we're not canceling out our existence, to also be above it, to be beyond it. And that is such a blessing in life that it helps get through the most difficult of things. You're able to achieve it, you're able to get through it. Shalom.